So welcome on this analysis of the results from our mapping exercise of National Society needs. What we're looking at right now is our original chart mapping current National Society capacity and future National Society areas of opportunity. As we explained in the earlier tutorial, the vertical axis looks at National Society capacity. Now we have to recognize that this capacity may be extremely low in one or several of our 5 areas. If that's the case, we should prioritize National Society leadership and vision when we have such a low capacity. So that's what's appearing here on red. Now, sectors that fall in this red zone, let's assume our readiness to respond is considered that there's a very low capacity in the National Society. Then we shouldn't address that specific area, but we should, until we've actually been able to address the underlying leadership and vision issues that would mean the National Society is able to prioritize specific needs in that particular area. For instance, again, readiness to respond. So on our horizontal axis at the bottom, we're looking at the National Society perceived needs that a partner National Society like the American Red Cross could support with. So it's our potential for partner National Society involvement. But our National Society perceived need for external support is a self-perception. We're looking at where the National Society sees greatest opportunity for improvement with external support. We're not looking at where they may have the greatest needs. This is how they see themselves. So because of this, we should recognize that there may be some national societies that simply don't have a clear understanding of their own needs. They may recognize that they have weak management capacity, but not know where to start to address it. They may not know anything about project management cycles or what project management courses are available to help their teams understand project management. They may not know that their national society can rely on broader movement tools and methodologies to address those community challenges. So here as well, if we're looking at that National Society perceived need for external support, we should also have a red area which corresponds to the very low perceived need for external support, which is related to this low capacity and which we would address through OD mapping interventions such as STAR or OCAC. Now, the mission of the American Red Cross and its international programs is to build National Society capacity. This means that our work is done when the National Society has National Society organizational developments that are functional, with no needs for external support. They have a high capacity in project management and technical input, and the ability to address its needs on its own. High response capacity, and also the commitment to and resources to continue to improve their response capacity. That the National Society has high branch capacity throughout its territory and is committed to invest its resources in further branch developments. And finally, we're looking at national societies that have a high capacity for service provision in vulnerable communities with a political commitment to be present wherever Red Cross is needed. So ultimately, we want a national society with a high capacity and low future perceived needs for external support, needs that the National Society is unable to address on its own. So this is the green area that just appeared on the chart that tells us that our support is no longer needed in that particular area of the National Society. However, to get there, many national societies start from a very low threshold. Often it's a limited capacity, but also limited understanding as to where they could start or what support is available. So what we're going to present now is an attempt to structure our American Red Cross engagement with national societies around these 5 sectors to help them progress towards greater self-awareness and capacity. So the lowest level is encountered in national societies with limited capacity, but they also have limited understanding of the way forward. So in the area of leadership, management and technical teams as well, this can be addressed through leadership workshops such as STAR and OCAC, where we could bring in consultants to help understand the challenges. Because we're talking about very low capacity to the point that they're not at a point they are able to identify how they could request external support. If we talk about readiness to respond, we could carry out exercises such as the Well-Prepared National Society assessment that can be conducted, or part of a more comprehensive series of interventions, including mixed assessments, or the evaluation of simulation exercises in a response environment, or others. Just make mention to the Canadian Red Cross's SIRA approach as one of the most comprehensive models. In the area of community resilience or community engagement, the lack of national society commitment or interest in community engagement would need to be discussed as part of a leadership assessment to determine why the national society exists, what is its reason for existing if it does not involve community outreach. So through these self-assessments that the American Red Cross can facilitate, the national societies, or at least the weakest ones, for which we've placed some or all their sectors in this bottom left-hand corner, they'll gain better self-awareness of their challenges, and they'll gain a better understanding of the priorities, including priorities for international cooperation. So our second box shows areas where there is greater potential for partnership. Now, it may not be uniform. The National Society may have a clear understanding of the weaknesses of its response processes and still be totally uninterested in community engagement activities. So it may understand the steps it needs to take to make its managers more effective, but it may not recognize that its statutes need to be updated or its leadership need to be renewed. So this would require more ambitious interventions for us, because there's this understanding of where they want to go, based on clear requests from the National Society, and this would allow us to help the National Society enhance its capacity. So this shift to our higher capacity box in blue here, in the top right corner, in any of the 5 sectors would indicate an ability to take on increasingly challenging tasks, from reviewing statutes, updating strategic plans, updating standard operating procedures for disaster response, reviewing the management or branch structure, or expanding into new communities or new coalitions. So this would still require external resources, though the capacity is there, and the objective is to empower the National Society to act on its self-identified priorities. So this implies a shift in helping the National Society to build its financial and human resource base. So it could be through fundraising, it could be through volunteer management systems. So how do we get the National Society through programs to reach that greater level of capacity? Now, ultimately, this process will lead to the state where the self-identified needs requiring external support, so our left side of the chart, will decrease. We'll have fewer such needs, to the point where the American Red Cross will engage in an exit strategy and shift instead to bilateral or two-way exchanges, as is currently the case in cross-border cooperation and disaster response with the Mexican Red Cross, where there's no longer a constant programming presence in Mexico. It is a partnership between the two national societies on how they want to work together. Now, before we go any further in this analysis, this process of our national societies and these charts that we developed to analyze them, let's take a step back and look at the options available in how we, as the American Red Cross, engage with national societies. So in very general terms, there are 2 engagement strategies that offer themselves to us in our work with national societies. There's the directive strategy, or there's the facilitative strategy. Now, the directive approach focuses on control. It's about controlling resources, which implies giving the teams exactly what they need and define their work and responsibilities in a specific routine way. So the directive approach assumes that employees or partners must be driven, coordinated, directed, supervised, and pointed toward the organizational objectives. They must be given the means and the ends for pursuing a task. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the facilitative approach that looks at empowerment. Now, in this other approach, our role is shifting to enhancing the people's capacity to make creative and appropriate decisions under conditions of uncertainty. You want the people to feel confidence in their own ability to adjust the plans in such a way that they won't be trapped in inertia, or they take the initiative to a very different place than we had initially intended. So a manager or an organization that places emphasis on facilitative skills to sustain momentum assumes that most individuals are self-motivated and appreciate challenge. So we're assuming that given the proper conditions, people would learn, adapt, use their imagination, and really look at new ways of engaging or addressing a problem. Now, neither model is the right model, but there are moments in time when one model or one approach may be more appropriate than another. So the idea here is to look at what are the implications for our chart and for the different levels of progress of our national societies. So the key driver here, again, is the partner's capacity. In a national society with a low capacity, the lower half of our chart, we're talking about hand-holding. How do we help the national societies better understand their challenges and where to start? How can we help them get where they want to be? So this is the directive approach, more hands-on, requiring a heavier investment in time and resources for more limited results. Now, this approach is in line with traditional project approaches to support with clear project agreements and indicators, or we can also use time-bound grant letters with clear deliverables. We want to know exactly where the National Society is going. It has low capacity. We want to hold their hands to get there. Now, national societies with higher capacity, we want them to take on more ambitious goals with limited support. Now, this is the facilitative approach, focused on empowering our partners. Now, we can do this through requests for proposals or small grants that provide a lot of freedom in the identification of activities with limited oversight. We can also contribute to existing programs that they may have through funding or fundraising to enhance the portfolio without making the National Society dependent. Now, the level of partner National Society engagement, such as the American Red Cross, must be determined always by the National Society. So if the National Society does not see the need for external support, any support will be limited to one-off actions. So this would be the left side of our chart. Low perceived needs for external support, so we would have limited interventions. Now on the other side, if there's a clear mandate for partner support from the National Society, we, as the American Red Cross, can support more ambitious partnerships. So this is the right side of our chart. When there is this clearly stated need for external support, allows us to have more ambitious interventions. So once we have this better grasp of our partners' capacity and perceived need for support, we can determine the best intervention at each phase of our relationship with our partner. In our hands-on approach with partners who perceive very little need for external support, we want to limit the risks that this represents for us, for the American Red Cross. They have a limited capacity, and we want to help them clarify their needs. So in this particular case, we can rely on OD-focused small grants or targeted consultancies for activities such as guided self-assessments like OCAG or the Well-Prepared National Society in the case of the readiness to respond. Now, once we have a clear idea of where there is a greater understanding of the areas for involving ourselves in providing our support, we can come up with a project approach to help build capacity. This is where project agreements, detailed implementation plans can help us support the National Society through a more directive approach. So we're really talking about hands-on directive approaches for partners with limited capacity. As the National Society capacity increases, the American Red Cross should shift to a more facilitative, hands-off approach. National societies should be encouraged to identify their needs through, for example, open requests for applications. We have been testing. So this means that progressively the National Society is using its enhanced capacity to have more freedom and take more initiative. And as the needs of that National Society are no longer require external support from a partner National Society, perhaps because they're able to submit proposals directly to donors, so they no longer need our funding, the American Red Cross role should shift to mutually beneficial exchanges and partnerships, paving the way for the exit strategy. And I mentioned the example of the Mexican Red Cross, bilateral or mutual exchanges, mutual support in the event of disasters. So national societies may be at any point of the way in this process and may often be at a different stage in the 5 sectors that we have interest in. But the general logic should remain the same. For each sector, whether it's high-level leadership and vision, organizational development, technical and managerial capacity, readiness to respond, and so forth, we need to get a good understanding of how we help our partners to get a good sense of their needs, identify those needs for which they could make some great strides if they had this external support, and then based on their current capacity, determine how we get them there and get ourselves out of the picture. So using this chart, let's start mapping our national societies, and off we go to determine our approach for each one.